Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Today I am joined by Jen, a licensed mental health counselor from Placid Soul Counseling, and we are going to talk about the question everybody asks at some point: why am I the way I am? We'll explore core beliefs, attachment styles, and how understanding them can help you become more self aware and essentially help you get out of your own way and into a life that you love. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Real quick, guys, before we dive into today's episode, I am a licensed counselor associate, but I'm not your personal counselor. The information shared on this podcast is for educational and inspirational purposes only and is not intended to replace or substitute professional counseling. So if you or someone you know is struggling, please reach out for help. The 988 hotline is available for a suicide and crisis lifeline. You don't have to walk this life alone. Let's jump into today's episode. You had to go back and tell yourself something when you were in your 20s. What would you take a time machine back and tell yourself?
A lot of things, but definitely don't be afraid to fail, because that is something that I definitely was afraid to do. Like, needed some good facts to know, like, if I make this choice, it's going to work out. And we don't always have that. So don't be afraid to fail.
Yes, I think that is so important. Like when you're in your 20s, everything just seems so uncertain. And like you said, you really want to know, if I take this step, like what's the math problem here? 2 plus 2 doesn't always equal 4, especially in your 20s. So I definitely agree with that. So I'm kind of curious a little bit about your background. Like, tell us more about how you became a therapist and maybe a little bit of your journey that you're referencing of like being afraid to fail.
Yeah. So I went to college, even before I knew the program existed. All throughout high school, like, I knew I wanted to help people, but I knew, like, in a specific way of like guiding people, counseling. So I learned, early on in my life that that was just something I loved. I could always just feel more than people around me without anything being said. I just kind of picked up on like certain cues people were giving. I knew if like someone's feelings were hurt by someone, something said to them. But maybe the person who intended to share that comment with the person didn't know it hurt them, but I did. Like, the empath in me just felt everything. And I, of course, needed the skill set, clinically to help people. So I found the program and came to Rhode Island. I grew up in New York. So came here and just fell in love with the program and continued through to my master's. I took about 2 weeks off after my bachelor's and went right into the program. And that was great, being able to actually like put it into effect and start to help people. So my internship was my favorite thing. I learned so much so quickly. And of course, there were times of being like, who's letting me do this? Like, I'm 21 years old. How am I like here, counseling and getting people therapy? But that's how you learn, is by doing. So
Yeah.
I knew, I actually wrote my parents a note when I was in my master's program. And I told them, like, these are all the things I'm going to do. And that I'm going to, do my internship, graduate, get a job that, feels like a good first job. And then I'm going to open my own private practice. And I joked and said, I'm going to also buy them a beach house when I'm rich. And I just knew that this is what I wanted to do. So I left my full-time job working at a mental health agency and went full-time private practice. And I think still every day I am just like pinching myself. Like, I can't believe that I'm doing this job that I love so much and that I find so much honor in doing. And that was the example of like, you know, before I left, like, what if it doesn't work out? And what if I need to come back to like a full-time, mental health facility job? And that was when I was, getting more willing to take a risk and getting more willing to, be afraid to fail. So when I opened my practice, this was several years ago now, but where I am now in my office space, I've been here about 3 years. And again, just the best work that I could be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm Yeah.
That's awesome. I feel like your journey is actually kind of unique in a way of you knew what you wanted to do from a young age and you were very in tune with your skill set and like you were in tuned with intunement. Like you knew that you felt things that other people may not have felt. And becoming a counselor at such a young age comes with its own challenges, right? And like imposter syndrome, doesn't matter what age you are, you're gonna face that. But becoming a counselor at that age, you're like, I'm curious, was there any like doubts in your mind of being a young counselor?
So I was more fearful of the people that I was working with, like questioning, like, how old are you? Like, I've been asked that before many
Mhm.
times in my career, but I was working with kids specifically. So I was working in the population of children with trauma. So I would talk with their families a lot. And when the, caregivers or families would come in and I was getting so much work done clinically, and I would talk to them about it. They, because of course, there was information I had to give them about themselves or their household or family dynamics. And that's when I would get questioned, coming more of a like defense, which was like, how old are you? And why are you telling me
Mm,
these things? So I think it was
sure.
like a healthy mixture of, being asked and really like
Yeah.
I have stories, of course, and I can go on tangents, but there is one that sticks out to me. And I was sharing information about my client to their family, and the family began to like really use that opportunity to discredit me and like kind of say like, where'd you graduate from and how long have you been doing this? How old are you? And then
Yeah.
that's the moment that you kind of learn like, you know, it's not what you're saying, it's just the role that you're in. But
Mm,
of course, there
that's a
were
good point.
times where, you know, you go into work and you're like, I just made like a big mistake over the weekend, or I just, had like a mess going on personally. And then you go into work and you're in this role where you're helping people.
Yep,
And sometimes it's easier to help people with their problems than address your own. So that
for sure.
definitely comes with the job too.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right when you say that. And so for you, like I think you're again, like your journey is so unique of knowing what you wanted to do at a young age and facing the challenges of imposter syndrome at a young age, but I think imposter syndrome doesn't go away with age. If you would have became a counselor at 35, 40, you probably would have faced some of those same things and like you said it's the nature of the profession more so than whatever age you come into it. So, when you kinda are talking to your younger 20-year-old self and you're telling her not to or, it's okay to be scared to fail, I would love for you to talk a little bit more about how that, like, really presented in jumping for you, I think what you're referring to was jumping into private practice and, like, going off on your own and, like, the fear behind that. So, I would love for you to talk more about that journey.
Yeah. So being able to kind of line things up and, you know, really like start your own business at a young age. And again, I was around like 27. Um, and being able to know like how do you do this? How do you like start a business, get an LLC, get an office space, get your name out there like to clients so that you have a stable income there. And a lot of that, I had that imposter syndrome. Like, am I allowed to be doing this? Like, how do other
Yeah.
people do it? Maybe it's just not cut out for me. Like, maybe I
Mm,
just need to stay like where I'm comfortable, which is in that community agency where I have other people helping me. And then it really took that like moment of being like, I know I can do this. I am confident in my skills. Everyone else figured it out, so I can. And like,
yeah.
I'm not ashamed to say that Google is so helpful. And like, people like will ask me, like, how did you do this? How did you just go and like start a business and like research? Like, you're looking up, like, how do people do this? Because there were times that, you have questions and you just don't know, exactly how you're supposed to formulate the plan, but to speak to the point too of like, it's okay to rely on people around you. And
Mm,
I had an amazing mentor who made it look so easy. And she's like, "Oh, you just do this and that," and she was so helpful to me to be able to to show me and kind of like pave the path there. And that really, you know, was a extended period of time. There was about 6 months I dedicated to opening my practice as well. And throughout that whole time, I questioned it every day. And that's
Yeah.
important to mention too. Just that, like, am I doing the right thing? Can I do this? And then, of course, when it came to fruition and I actually started doing it, is when it really became like so fulfilling to know, like, even when I'm scared, it's still going to work out. And even when I'm scared, I know that it's still gonna be good at the end. So that kind of period of time was a lot of trial and error and also just not being afraid to tell people like, yeah, like I don't know exactly what's gonna
Yeah.
happen, but I'm hopeful that it will work out.
Yeah, that's so good. You said so many great things in your story of opening your private practice. I love that you mentioned having a good support system, having a good mentor in your life is important, like having someone who has walked the road before you and is kind of like I love that you said that your mentor was, like, "Yeah, you just do this, like, it's no biggie," and having someone with that level of confidence is like, okay. If they kind of were showing that they were, like, nervous or wading the waters, that they weren't certain, you that would amplify you, it would multiply how you're
Yes.
already feeling. But having someone that was so confident in probably their journey and, like, seeing it from the other side, but also looking at you, knowing that you're competent and that you'll be able to do it instills hope inside of you as well, and I also love that you're saying about being scared and do it anyways. Like, I think
Yeah.
that we tend to just, like, live like, we wanna stay in our comfort zones, and that's just human nature, but I love that you're saying, I'm always like, take your fear and, like, bring it along for the ride with you. Like, put it in your passenger seat and, like, go for the drive together because you can't expect the fear to go away, but you can step out in faith and, let life show you, like, that it can be good for you.
Yeah. Yeah. That willingness is everything because it will help, if you're just willing to find out what happens and to understand whatever it is, that it is still information that you need. Like if say it didn't work out, like that would be needed to make different decisions. But that exactly to your point that you need to be like okay with fear not being completely eliminated.
Yeah, but knowing that the fear is not going away, and I love that you just said too of no matter what, it's information. I think a lot of times, like even in my journey, I tried a lot of different things and my mom would always tell me that I had a list of what I didn't wanna do. My list of what I didn't wanna do was a lot bigger than the list of what I did wanna do, and I feel like that is so controversial to society, like, I feel like it's more praised if what it is that you wanna do from, like, a young age, like, "I wanna be a nurse," and you go out and you become that nurse, I feel like that is more, like, praised than I'm gonna try to, try these different things, and I can at least tell you what I don't wanna do. So that was
Yeah.
very much my journey, and it's all
Yeah,
information.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I kind of want to get into now, like the clients that you typically see that are in their 20s. What do you feel like is like the main or one of the main themes that you tend to see?
So my favorite emails to get from clients who are like requesting to have a session is the reason for coming in is because they're like, I want to know why I am the way I am. And I love that email because I'm like, perfect. Like I love doing that work. And when someone is in a space where they've kind of come to grips with the fact that there's more there and that there's more going on with them, that they're seeing the impact around them, it is in that like sweet spot of the choice is like all of those clients. Of course, occasionally you'll have like, 30 or 40 somethings come in and be like, well, like I can't run from it anymore. I need to talk about things, but it's the 20 somethings that want to figure out why they operate the way they do.
Yeah.
And that's, seen in their relationships. They might come in and say, like, my partner keeps pointing this out, and I think I do need to address and work on it. Or if they are struggling to date and find a partner because they feel like they keep having like repeat of patterns.
Mm.
So that's really what comes in. And a lot of the main issue too is that comparison that the clients are always comparing their life to someone else's, whether it's career, finances,
Yeah.
relationships. There is so much comparison that sends them in a downward spiral.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think it's profound the people that are willing to embark on that journey in their 20s so that way they don't wake up in their 30s and 40s saying, "I can't run from this any longer," and they probably did a lot of damage of, like, along the way of maybe hurting other
Mhm.
people with some of their core beliefs that they're kind of running from. So I think it's a profound journey that they are ready to embark on at a young age, and I would love for you to talk more about this of like, the relationships in the comparison in their life, it's a natural thing that's happening because as we know, like, relationships, whether it's romantic, platonic, what have you, it's a mirror to yourself. It's reflecting something back to you.
Yes.
And it's up to us to decide if we want to actually look in that reflection and kind of, like, come to a session and be like, "Hey, I wanna work on this topic because I keep seeing it over and over again." I think yeah, so it's again, it's information and the comparison is it's a natural thing to look at other people, but hopefully what we can learn is when we're looking at someone or looking at the mirror of ourselves, instead of comparing in a negative light of like, "Oh, they have a better job than me," or "They have a better relationship than me," maybe we can look at it like, "There's something here that is being reflected back to me of something I would want in my life, and how can I use
Yeah.
that as information to add it to my life?" So I would love for you to kinda talk about what are some of, like, the practical ways of, like, how to start identifying these reflections or these patterns or, like, kind of the beliefs.
Yeah. I think the first thing is to see like what activates me, is to look around and to realize like when I see X, that's when I get activated and begin to compare. So being able to first kind of like gauge what areas do you feel most kind of triggered or activated by. So is it when you see like your friend go on a vacation and you're kind of sitting there like, I can't do those things right now because of finances or work? And then you begin comparing. Is it the area of relationships where if your friend is in a healthy, loving relationship, that you begin to, compare the fact that maybe yours is different or that you are single and still trying to kind of find a partner and being able to first kind of like understand what activates you most. And then I am a big, whether it's like verbal in here with clients or that clients do work outside of session where they're kind of writing out what exactly is their, the core beliefs that they have to first identify. And then for them to then identify the timeline that they have of, and it's not always relationship based, but just their general timeline of patterns where they may have been feeling like the core belief was present. So if it's the core belief of, I am unlovable, and they're kind of looking through like being with partners who are emotionally unavailable or a different attachment style than them, um, then they might be getting that core belief validated. So I think those are pretty practical ways of beginning to identify those.
Definitely. I feel like with core beliefs, I would love to hear your opinion on this. There's many, many layers to it. And I think it takes a lot of introspection to kind of uncover them all because I feel like they present in a certain way. But then it's like you got to peel back the onion to really get down to that core belief of what, like, to finally admit to yourself that you have a core belief that I am unlovable. That takes, I think, a lot to get there and a lot of courage to look at something like that because that's very, very painful of, like, where that came from could be really painful for a client to look at. So, tell m like, I kinda wanna open this up a little bit more of like, working towards those understanding those core beliefs. So I know, like, we're kinda talking about seeing, like, patterns in relationships and seeing, like, "Oh, I constantly am attracting emotionally unavailable partners, so therefore I must think I'm not lovable." Like, I feel like it's just a much longer journey to finally get there. So
Yeah.
walk me through of, like, if you had a client come into your office, kind of what that journey would look like.
Yeah. So if they come in and they're kind of naming certain, because I'll always ask if it's relationship based, I will ask, what are those persistent issues that come up for them? Because every couple has them. Like people know that like for long term, that they typically will have persistent issues with finances, with, time management. And like these are things that we'll always argue about. So couples like know that about themselves and their relationship. So I'll ask, like, what are those persistent issues that come up on repeat? And when they name what they are, that helps me then identify like what direction to go in. And when we look deeper beyond that, if they, through work and questions that I ask to really get down to that root, I'll ask, questions about their current relationship. And then I will ask, and my colleagues in my office space, we joke because sometimes it's like, we just want to be like, okay, so you were born and then like walk me through everything up until like you sitting on this couch. But I asked because it's so important to understand how they grew up, what their childhood dynamic was, because it all matters. And that's, I think, what people are most fearful of doing is coming in and really taking a different lens to look at their childhood and their caregivers and the connection that they had or didn't have with caregivers and how that impacts them. So clients will come in thinking like they're going to just talk about the relationship and how to like make changes with themselves so it
Yeah.
benefits the relationship, but it's so much more than that. So then I'll typically ask those questions around, tell me about what messages you got as a child from your caregivers and if that was, congruent to maybe what you're feeling now and
Mm,
being able to clearly identify what needs were not met as a child that you are now bringing into relationships in your adult life. So when we do that work, I have to do a lot of, explaining and reassuring that when we are children, we're given a blueprint from our parents and from our caregivers of like, this is how you do things. And whether that's, what is modeled of this is how you handle conflict, this is how you handle emotion, this is how you show love or
mm,
receive it. We're just given this blueprint and we follow it most times. So a lot of that helps to reduce the blame that people feel of like, why am I this way? And like, why do I keep like messing up or making these choices? And it all makes sense from where I sit because I can see things from a different angle and I have distance from it.
right.
But when we really look at, when needs are not met as a child and the love is like conditional and they're, if they are not giving any issue to the parent or they're, you know, kind of only presenting as good or perfect and really seeking reassurance in childhood, then they might face, that issues with emotional abandonment in childhood where they feel like they did not have that reassurance that they were loved. And then we'll see
Yeah.
that exact thing play out in adult relationships where they're trying to, handle everything, be, everything that they think their partner needs and depending on, of course, attachment style the partner has, we will see that kind of same rendition of what is happening, that they're trying to prove why they're lovable. So when we are able to connect the childhood dynamic to the current relationship, they begin to discover a lot more of helpful information of what that inner child is kind of at play. Like what cards are they showing here
Sure.
that can help us with the work that we're doing? Yeah. So a lot of conversation around let's just look at this from an angle of curiosity versus
Mhm.
judgment and not be so critical about why we're the way we are, but really just like let's learn more here and get
Yeah.
curious.
Yes, that's so good. That is one of my favorite. I mean, I think as therapists, like that should be the approach is curiosity and to stay curious, but really inviting the client to do that for themselves because I don't think that's very common for any of us to do that, right? Because we are so harsh on ourselves. But like if we can take the lens of judgment off and put the lens of curiosity, now we can like learn from it and be like,
Yeah.
"Okay, what are you all about?" instead of just trying so hard to force yourself out of a certain behavior. I think you need to understand maybe the thoughts and feelings before you can change the behavior. And I think something that I feel like I'm learning with like inner child work is there's a lot of shame around looking at your childhood because I think our programming, a lot of it was survival growing up. Like, we had to become the people we are to survive, and, our parents were supposed to love us unconditionally, so I think there's a lot of shame around, like, looking at your childhood because whether I don't know where these messages come from, but that you're supposed to just be ultimately grateful for your parents no matter how they were, no matter how they treated you. They did the best with the knowledge they had. They're humans at the end of the day too. And I think there's like this subliminal messaging that puts on this cloak of shame that I shouldn't even look at this because my parents, they did the best with what they could. And it's like I think two things can exist at once. I think
Exactly.
they can't they that is true, they did the best. But it doesn't mean that we're not entitled to look at it and look at it from a lens of curiosity so that way we can make different decisions going forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And there is so much shame, and it happens all the time where clients will allow themselves to go there and to think about like the needs that weren't met as a child. And then they'll say, like, my parents were amazing. And I'm like, I believe you. So
Yeah.
they'll like constantly do this like dance around, like, I don't want you to think that they're like bad or that like they're amazing. They did their best. And it's all this explanation that they feel like they need to give.
Yes.
But to your point, a lot of it is that just duality and being able to name like both can be true at the same time. Like your parents can be great and you may have needed more as a child, and that's okay to talk about. So a lot of it is that permission giving.
Yeah, it does always feel like a blanket statement of when you're like, I didn't feel validated as a kid, but my parents were great." And it's like covering it up really quick instead of like and I think that's really important for like having a safe place to explore that of like, let's take that blanket back off for a second and like kind of just sit with the you didn't feel validated, like and like let's just chat about that. And I like you said, I do believe you, your parents were great, but like let's leave that out of the room for a second. And yeah, I think that's really important. And I think something else that I'm, learning about all this like inner child work too is our nervous systems are trying to like you were kind of mentioning, like we will constantly seek out these same patterns to either validate us or in hopes to rewrite the conversation in our heads, in our nervous system of I will finally be chosen. This time I'll finally be chosen. Like, watch this,
Mm,
trying to play like this game with ourselves of trying to get our needs met through other people and then learning and trying to figure out what that core belief is, what that need is. And then I think true healing happens when we're able to finally meet that need for ourselves. Yeah.
yes, exactly. Yeah. And they, a lot of, I've had a group of clients like for years, and I'm a big fan of that. Of course, we'll take breaks here and there, but then they come back and they'll like sit down again and they're like, I did it again. Like I dated this person and I knew I shouldn't, and I knew like the different flags that were coming up, but I just wanted it to be different. And I wanted to like show myself that like, I can just, like, if I stick it out, like, they will change for me and they will, like, make these, decisions that will lead us to be, together, and they'll really see me and they'll finally, like, love me and choose me. And that isn't how it typically would go.
Right.
Yeah. And that's more devastating to clients too when they think that something's going to be different and it's not, because it validates that original story for them.
And yes, it validates that core belief instead of like rewriting the script that they were hoping for. And I think the problem with that, it's like, it's so good that, this time you thought it would be different, that you put in the work in therapy and maybe you showed up as a different person this time around and you were ready for a different script and a different ending. But it's especially in like a romantic relationship, it's like, but have they done the work? Have they looked under their hood of what might be going on? And maybe like maybe it wasn't a good fit, but also maybe they haven't done the work needed as well, and there's something in both of you that activates each other.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Which I kinda wanna talk about this a little bit more because there were several times you had mentioned attachment styles and how those play a factor into dating and friendships in your 20s, and we're kind of, like, touching on it a little bit when we're talking about, like, this mirroring of each other, like, what you see in someone or why you're attracted to certain people. So I would love for you to kinda talk about how attachment styles show up in, like, being an adult.
Yeah. So definitely work around what like identifying that attachment style, and I can tell pretty quickly because they have very specific qualities. What work is I love when clients do, and another tangent, but like media has been both helpful and unhelpful surrounding therapy, but I like to highlight what is helpful about it. Is that more people are talking about their experience in therapy online. So I've had clients come in and they're like, I saw this TikTok or like I read this thing. And is it true that like I'm going to look for a partner who's like my dad? So to speak to that point, because it relates to the attachment, is that our brains know when we're creating that first attachment with caregivers, whoever it is taking care of us, if it's an aunt, if it's a mom, a dad, we as babies are forming an attachment to like this is how I connect with someone. So if we have a parent who is present, who's taking care of needs, meeting needs, and then some, that would of course be ideal because then you have a secure attachment where you're not panicked by certain things. You know how to handle conflict in a way that's regulated, and there isn't that need to kind of seek reassurance or to push someone away because you don't know if they're consistent or not.
Mhm.
Identifying your relationships with your caregivers and parents is helpful in that beginning process to identify what attachment style you have. And then, in terms of like who you would be attracted to, back to that brain that you're developing, when your brain is developing growing up, um, you are beginning to kind of claim like what is your safe and what is your familiar. And then you're going to see that in adult relationships.
Mm.
So when people question, like, why do I keep going back to this type of person? It's both what's internal and what like insecurities or deeper wounds might be there for the person, in addition to like, what is the brain used to? What is the brain
Mm.
identified as like familiar? Because we just like to, like human nature, we like to be comfortable and safe and in familiar spaces. So we're just going
Yeah.
to repeat that same pattern.
Yeah. I think to kind of touch on your point of your tangent of media, I feel like especially with attachment styles, there's a lot of information out there right now. And I think I have mixed feelings about it as well, because I think like you're saying, it's great to have awareness around this and try to learn what is your style? Where did it come from? Why are you the way you are? Basically, like the question that most people come into your sessions with. And then I feel like there's a category of people or videos coming out now of, like, how to beat an avoidant or, like, how to get around, and play their game, and it's like, now we're kind of moving away from, I guess, what we would do in session with somebody.
Yeah.
We're moving towards, like, the other person, so I feel like there's, like, this camp, and that's why, therapy talk or whatever you wanna call it gets a bad rap because there is just, like, information being spewed out there, and the goal isn't to try to play someone else's game, it's to learn about your own dynamics and behaviors because at the end of the day, when you're able to look at those, that's the only thing that you can alter, fix, work on, you just learn about. It's not your job to learn about someone else's attachment style
Yeah.
at the end of the day.
Right. Right. And oftentimes clients will feel very, kind of pointing a finger at their partner, like, why can't he just put the phone down and like talk to me? And why can't you just do this? And if he only changed that, we would be successful and we'd be happy. And my, response when a lot of clients are pointing fingers at their partner is to truly understand what you just said there of like, it's not about changing them. If you're both waiting for each other to change, like it's not going to be successful. What is it in you that is getting activated when he's on the phone or when she's on the phone? What is it about you that is getting activated? And I ask this question a lot of, walk me through what happened. When they share that, I say, what does that remind you of? Like, what
Mm,
about this is familiar? And so many times they will be able to pretty quickly get to the spot of like, each time that I, have memories of childhood, it's me trying to engage my dad or trying to engage my mom and them being busy and them, rejecting me. So that's what it's about. It's not about your partner on the phone. It's about what your childhood experience was and how that wound is getting like touched on
yeah.
and being able to really identify that.
Yeah. I love that question. I'm definitely stealing that. Like, what does this
Yes,
remind
good.
you of?
Yeah.
Like that's
Yeah.
just so powerful. And I'm curious to ask this question of, can your attachment styles change over time? So even if you grew up in a secure household, right? And like you had secure parents, but like say after you moved out or whatever, and you had a couple crappy boyfriends, like can your attachment style change in that way?
It's possible to be able to go from secure to maybe anxious or avoidant. I have seen it before with clients where like they have rapport. And of course, I hear this a lot and I get skeptical just because everyone has their stuff. But I have clients say, like, I had a perfect childhood, like nothing
Mm,
was wrong.
yeah.
And I always am like, I'm going to come back to that later. But
Put a pin in that one.
yeah, but they will say like everything, like I felt loved, I felt taken care of, all my needs were met, but then I was with this person and we'll see it happen when there is maybe like if there's infidelity, like if someone was cheated on, they now have that at play with them. So
Mhm.
they could have been secure, but now their, behavior and thoughts and feelings surrounding relationships has changed. So now they're going to be seeking reassurance. But it's the question of, is that attachment related or is that their trauma and stress, kind of
Yeah.
playing out to try to make sure that story doesn't repeat? So I think
Mhm.
that, different examples of that can definitely trigger different symptoms.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it kind of, in a sense, destructs what they maybe their core beliefs around relationships, so that this is a safe place, and then when, like, infidelity or betrayal happens, it kind of rewrites and disrupts a lot of what you originally believed, and you're like, "Whoa, I'm not as maybe safe as I thought I was," and I think that's important to
Yes.
note. Yeah,
It's a lot of like self preservation and protection at that point, too. So if they're kind of
absolutely.
leaning forward, they're going to say, I am going to now make myself not need anyone or anything from someone to survive and kind of self preserve here and protect
Mm.
myself. But yeah, that's all I wanted to add there.
Yeah, I think that yeah, protection plays a huge role into our attachment styles. Like even an avoidant who is afraid to get too close to someone because maybe they had abandonment in their childhood. I think a lot of it comes from a protection place, and like the anxious person who needs that reassurance all the time. That's self protection too. Yeah. So when you were maybe secure and then it changed to anxious or avoidant, like, again, it was probably your body's way of being like, "Never again will I let that happen."
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm curious of, like, why does attachment styles really start showing up in your 20s? Like, what is it about your 20s that you start to see, like, these different patterns appear?
So the 20s are just a time where there's so much learning happening, but it's like exploratory. So everyone
Mhm.
in their 20s is like, you're fresh out of high school and then you have a couple of years there where you're just kind of doing whatever. And then once you're 20, and again, like big numbers indicate things to people. So like 20s, 30s, 40s. So there's all these like assumptions of like, well, I'm 20 now and I thought I would be doing,
Yeah.
XYZ by now, or I thought I'd be in a different space. And there begins to be just a lot more exploring in our 20s to figure out what we want to be doing. So I think that comes through relationships and connections and friendships and really like understanding who we're seeking out to have in our space, in our circle. And there
Mm,
begins to be just so much of that lens of like starting to maybe see some problematic behavior we're engaging in, or starting to notice more about ourselves as we're coming to and doing so much exploring. People do get, very attached to like the image of what they thought they would be doing by now.
yeah.
So I think that kind of spins people in a direction where they want to actually start looking at things.
Yeah, I think the arbitrary timelines of that we create in our heads in our 20s that can send us into a tizzy of like you said, I thought I would be somewhere different by now. I thought like even myself, my timeline is not what it turned out to be, and I'm okay with that. But I just think it's when you kind of create this timeline, I don't think it's necessarily like a bad thing because I think it's human nature in a way of like
Yeah.
kind of like creating a roadmap. Like you should have an idea of where you're wanting to be going, but able to hold that roadmap loosely of knowing that life is going to unfold how it's supposed to and letting letting it unfold, right? But so I feel like my encouragement for like 20-year-olds and is to it's okay to have like a timeline in your head or kind of an idea of where you're going, but just to hold it loosely.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And even for the ones who don't know what they want to do, that's a question that comes up a lot in here is like, I'm supposed to know what I want to do. Or like,
Mm,
how do I not have this figured out? And in place of, you know, having so much like critique around it, I really try to encourage clients. And some of them will like look at me like I'm crazy and I'll name that. I'm like, I know it sounds crazy, but can you just like, what would happen if you reframe this to be like excited to figure it out versus like so
right.
critical around it? But how exciting that we just get to figure out what we want for our life and what we want for ourselves. And, it's such an exciting time to be able to just decide like, maybe I want to start a business, or maybe I want to go back to school, and maybe I want to, have a different job than I do now just to see if I like it. So it can
Yeah,
be really exciting, but again, we're kind of conditioned that we like should know everything and have a plan and be fulfilling all these other areas.
absolutely. And I think, like you're saying, like, using it as an experimental time of your life and trying to figure it out. I do empathize with people that because I just think like I said, society kind of puts you in a box of like you should have it figured out and you shouldn't be messy and you shouldn't like try a bunch of different things to figure it out. But I think that's a very small percentage of people that have a pretty clear path of where they're going. And I think just giving people permission that it's okay to pivot, it's and that nothing that you did or will do will be wasted. I think that's, like, another big thing is, like, whatever skill set you learned, like, if you were a waitress, like, that skill set that you learned and maybe you wanna become a nurse now, that skill set is going to transfer some way, somehow. You have an ability to multitask. You have an ability to remember a lot of things at once. You can be on your feet for a long period of time. Like, it's a fast paced environment. Like, the skills actually will probably transfer when you get into it. And now, like, let's say you're a nurse now and you're like looking back, you're like, that makes total sense of how I ended up where I am today. But it's
Yeah.
giving yourself permission to pivot.
Yes, yes. And you're allowed to, I say this a lot to my clients when they get like stuck. I'm like, you are the decision maker of your life. Like you get to decide. It's not about everyone else. It's about you. And you can wake up every day and be like, I actually don't want to be in this job, or I want to change career. And that can be really just motivating for clients to kind of realize again, like, oh wait, I can do whatever I want.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And as we're kind of talking about like jumping back to attachment styles and stuff, I think everybody has a goal in mind that they want to have a secure attachment. I think that would be ultimately the best if that's what we could achieve. So, what are some like tangible ways that you can start working towards becoming a more secure person?
So I think when we stop shifting our blame to our partner of like, well, they just don't meet my needs. Like they just don't do these things. When we stop doing that and we need to do our work to figure out why we're showing up in those moments like that or why we're getting activated, that's when we actually see results happening. So if we, again, just because we use the example of like a phone partner being on a phone in place of the anxious person being able to identify like a response there to the partner, what we would want to see it do is that practice and take opportunities to be able to notice like what is happening for me right now,
Mm,
and feeling, identify those feelings of being, ignored or dismissed or rejected. And what is showing in terms of the facts, like what facts do I have to prove that they are actually rejecting me or ignoring me? And what else is this reminding me of? And then to engage in like self soothing. So we are responsible to take care of ourselves in that moment, to be able to give the nervous system input, to take deep breaths, and to really pause and ask ourselves those questions of like, what is coming up for me right now? And then to engage in that self regulation, to step away, take 10 minutes, go and, make a hot tea or get ice water, because those two things help really calm the nervous system down by incorporating temperature and talk to ourselves to reassure our own nervous system. Like, this
sure.
person is just on their phone. It's bringing up more for me because of other experiences. And I know that they do love me, care, that, they like spending time with me. It's not about those not being present. I'm just getting reminded of something right now and I need to deactivate the nervous system. So it's really that responsibility taking of this is my stuff coming up and being able to really recognize that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think taking like we've been kind of talking about, like you're the only one that can truly even love yourself like the way you want to be loved. Like that's your job to show up for yourself in all those ways. And I think that's super important to work towards self-regulation and working on all that stuff within yourself. Something that was kind of coming up as you're talking about this is I feel like the anxious attachment and the avoidant are like the most lethal combination because they activate each other so much. And I'm curious of where is the line drawn in the sand of an anxious person like, almost making excuses or, like, "This is about me, like, I need to go self-soothe, and I need to work on me," and they're never even looking at the other person of, do they even meet my needs? Because 'Cause they're so uncertain of what their needs are that at what where is the line drawn in the sand of now, like, we're just making excuses for this person's, like, bad behavior? Because as we mentioned earlier in our conversation, it takes 2 people to do the work. So, even like, we can sit there and identify, "I'm being triggered. This is reminding me of this. I'm gonna go self-soothe." When does the other person's responsibility show up in the chat?
Definitely want to say too, like the anxious avoidant cycle is vicious because they're tending to different parts of themselves, but it just keeps it going like so quickly. So because the anxious seeks validation and the avoidant is so independent and values their independence that their fear is like the closeness and the intimacy of emotional discharge. So when like there's so much emotion coming to them from the anxious, they're just going to run faster, which makes the anxious get closer and then it just keeps going. So to answer that question, I think it gets tricky when it's all kind of happening like very quickly. But if we slow things down to know, like doing my work and, focusing on what I can change here is one
Yeah,
thing. But if I'm asking my avoidant partner to like sit and have a conversation, it's the avoidant's job to know like that's not their jam. Like they don't want to sit and have a conversation that's full of emotion and connection. So it could be, if you're wanting the relationship to work, I think identifying attachment styles is huge. So like who your partner is and how they operate. So being able to know that it's your responsibility to express like this is what I need from you,
yeah,
and if the avoidant is able to, hear that and understand, that's one thing. But if they struggle to meet those needs because that is something that scares them, to have someone like be reliant on them or to have a moment of feeling like they can never meet all of your needs, then you'll see that pull away. So there's a lot of decision making that comes from like soothing myself can be one thing, but I also have to view the information that my partner is giving to me. Because if they show up and they show that they cannot meet my needs, then I have to make a decision. And I have to both know what activates me about behavior because of my stuff. And then also, do I have a partner who just does not have a desire to meet my needs in the relationship? Because that's okay. But then we have to make some decisions based off of that.
Right. Yeah. Being honest about the evidence that you are given.
Yes.
I think something with an anxious attachment styles is anxious attachment styles and also a little bit of codependency is a lot of times that category of people have a hard time even understanding what their needs are. So coming out and saying to their anxious partner, this is my need that I'm requesting to be met in is super challenging because they're caught in their own anxious loop of they're not even sure what their need is. So I think that brings us back to our conversation about core beliefs of going under there and figuring out like what's under the hood of I'm when you do this like or when this happens I feel like using I statements and trying to get to exactly what that need is so you can present that to the avoidant because I think this is kind of the rat race that we get caught up in is you're not certain what your need is and you're trying to emotionally charge the avoidant to help you figure out what your own need is. I'm probably turning a little wordy right now for some folks, but it's just like it is like this rat race that you can get caught in. So like you said, taking the space to try to figure out what that need is and like boiling it down to exactly what that need is and I think presenting it to the avoidant in a very simple way. I need more quality time with you. And if that is not something that they're able to meet, then you have the evidence to make the decision that you might need to make.
Exactly. Exactly. And we'll see too, that a lot of clients need the skills to learn like what their needs are to like identify. Cause when I ask that question, like, what do you need from your partner? They either know exactly what it is or they like, I have no idea. I just know I need something or more, but I can't like put my thumb on that. And when they are able to identify, like you gave the example of quality time, if they're able to understand that they have a partner who is avoidant, then we know that this conversation is not going to be met with, like, yeah, let's jump in, like, let's sit down and kind of talk about this. The avoidant is not going to appreciate that and is not going to feel like safe emotionally. So, what we want to consider as well is that self-soothing piece of I know that my avoidant is going to need this to kind of be like fact-based and driven by kind of like some goals here. So it might be that you go into that conversation and if the avoidance showing up kind of like, blank or seeming to be a bit detached, then that's their stuff. And that's so crucial to identify what's mine, what's theirs, and what's ours because if they show
Mm,
up and they're just kind of like, let's get this over with, of course that's
right,
hurtful and that's a conversation to have. And it's more about that person and their issues going on than about me. Like that's their inability to feel emotions in the way I do. It's not about me. And clients need so much help to maneuver that. And that's not to say if someone shows up and like, come on, spit it out, like get it over with, that you're like, yeah, that's great that they said that, like don't allow people to disrespect
right.
you. But it's this ebb and flow of knowing, there might be times where you need to have a conversation to express your needs. And if the avoidant is able to see that and tell you, like, I want to work on this, then that's the goal. It's communication and learning how to communicate with your attachment styles that are both at play, because that's where things tend to kind of break down.
I love that you said you got to understand what's mine, what's yours, and what's ours. I think boiling down attachment styles, I think that really sums it up and trying to separate those into categories of what belongs to me and my job to work on, what belongs to them, and then what belongs to us. And really, the two places that you have decisions to make is the me and us category. So you can look at your own behaviors and with the evidence you have in the us category, those are the two places that you can make different decisions.
Yeah. And a lot of it is like I have these questions I'll give to clients to bring into the space of conversation because it helps like identify these quick questions and that the conversation can be like 10 minutes, doesn't need to be 2 hours. But when they sit with their partner, asking their partner, how have you felt supported by me?
Mm.
Like this past month, if they do like monthly check ins, how have you felt most connected to me? Are there ways that I showed up that you like appreciated? And what can we kind of work on together? And it's like a good, very like clear focal point to come back to each month to kind of see where I see my clients struggle is when the anxious in that conversation is hearing from the avoidant, I need more space, I need more independence. That triggers the anxious. So that's a good example of knowing my partner's requesting this need from me. I'm panicking because of my anxious attachment and feeling like there's a fear of abandonment present. How can I self soothe in order to meet this need of my partner?
Yeah,
So that's that example of being able to have that ebb and flow because the more an anxious works towards self soothing and meeting a need of their partner wanting more independence, the more that they're going to get those skills they need to reassure that my partner can both want their space and love me. My partner can both want their independence and not want to end the relationship. And that's where
sure.
we'll see that, you know, to see those skills done. And then the anxious gets to tell the avoidant, I need more closeness. I need more quality time. How can we make sure that happens? So it's a good way of communicating.
Yeah. I love that. I love the open-ended questions of going into the space and asking even like on a week to week basis, how can I support you this week? And not showing up in the ways that you would want to be met. Cause I think that's like a big trap that we get caught up into of I think this is what I would want. So this is how I'm going to show up for you. And a lot of times that's not the way someone else needs us to show up. And then we get disappointed and we feel rejected based off like our efforts. Like, well, we tried really hard. We thought this would be helpful, but that's because we're trying to get our own needs met. And I think that's important to reflect on that conversation and check in with yourself. And I think just like being honest, even in a friendship of how can I be there for you right now and letting them tell you how they want their needs met instead of trying to meet them based off your own experiences.
Exactly. And I like the word trap because it is that trap of, well, I did all these things for you. And then the avoidant can say, that's not, I appreciate that, but it's not what I needed.
Yeah. Or I never asked you
Mm.
to do that. I think that's like a big like
Exactly.
thing that could be said in relationships. And that's very hurtful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we could talk about attachment styles for so long because they play such a big part in both romantic and platonic relationships. So we'll definitely either have to have a follow-up conversation or, just inviting clients to come work on these things individually with us, I think it's so important. There's so much to learn in this topic. But before we end, I want to ask you the question that I love to ask my guests is what is something that you do that helps you get out of your own way?
I definitely take moments of recognizing like I need to be willing to really look at myself here. So that willingness to get to know yourself is really important. So when I feel like I'm like not feeling good. My mood is like not where I want it to be. And I'm just feeling like different impacts. It's that like very classic example that is very popular right now. Like, did you drink water? Did you touch grass? Did you eat? Did you sleep? And like the basic needs need to be met for you to be functioning at your best. So the ability to be honest with yourself is it takes a lot of bravery to really look at like what am I doing? Like am I the problem here? And sometimes we are, and we need to be okay with that so that we can
Yeah.
pivot into like a different direction. But it's really that willingness to be honest with yourself and take accountability.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that we're ending on that note because we started off this conversation of when we were talking about what would you go back and tell yourself in your 20s and you said something I think you even used that word of being willing. And I think that is just life's journey is being willing to fail, being willing to show up, being willing to be humble, being willing to be brave and courageous. And I think if we could give advice to anybody listening in whatever walk of life they're in right now is to be willing and to be willing to look at your behaviors and patterns,
Yeah, exactly.
to do the inner work. Well, I loved this conversation, Jen, and I would love to shout you out. Where could people find you? Are you taking clients? Do you have a wait list? Where could they find you?
So I do have a wait list right now, but they can find me online. It's placidsoulcounseling.com. And I'm happy, have people reach out and I can add them to the wait list here. But definitely email, just let me know what you're looking to work on. And I do respond even if I'm not taking clients right away. I like to respond to either add them to the wait list, but also connect them with other therapists that are doing this work. That way they can continue to do the work.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I know that this episode will bless a lot of people, and I loved this conversation so much.
Me too. Thank you for having me.